When it comes to working with polygons in Maya, it helps if you are familiar with just a few of the basic aspects of polygon geometry. So first, let's start with something as simple like a cube. Now, to begin with, when you first create a cube or any piece of geometry in Maya, unless you have shaded mode active, you're going to just see what's called the wireframe. If you press 5 on your keyboard, it'll actually shade in your geometry. Now, what you're seeing is essentially the shape of the geometry, which itself is actually not a top-level component, so it's a lower-level component. When you actually select a piece of geometry, you're selecting the top-level transform, which is essentially just a container that you can use to control location, scale, rotation, and even visibility. As for the geometry itself, the polygon mesh, you can access that by right-clicking on the geometry and then choosing one of the components. So the components that you're usually going to use when it comes to actually shaping your geometry are usually the face, vertex, and edge components. If you choose any one of these, you'll actually be able to select those things. So I'm selecting edges right now, just clicking directly on the edge. If you press Shift, then you can actually select multiple edges at one time. Now, even though you're in edge mode, you could switch to a different mode, such as vertex, and then you'll be able to select vertices instead of selecting edges. Now, if you want to select multiple types, you could actually choose multi. So with multi, you can actually select faces, you can select edges, and you can select vertices all at the same time. So you can have multiple types all selected at one time. Now, by default, when you first create your geometry, if you look at your channels box, you'll actually see under inputs that you actually have some history. Now, under inputs, history, this is construction history. You can use construction history to your advantage, but once you no longer need it, it's usually a good idea to delete that history because it does add weight to your scene file. So in this case, we have a cube, and it's in the history we see the description of the width, the height, and the depth. And it says 1 next to each one of these because it's telling how many divisions there are per those, or actually it's telling you the height, the width, and the depth of the object. If I wanted to, I could change the width and make it basically narrower. The basic form is a cube, but now it's actually more of a rectangular cube. Now we also have subdivisions where we can actually control essentially the number of subdivisions per each direction. So the height is the Y, depth is the Z, width is along the x-axis, so usually from left to right. Now, once you are happy with the history that's been set for your geometry, you can delete that history either by going to Edit, Delete by Type, History, or you can select the geometry and press Option, Shift, and the letter D on your keyboard, and it will also delete that history. It only deletes the history for selected objects when you do it this way. You could do an Edit, Delete by Type, Delete All by Type history, but that's usually not a good idea because some history you actually do want to maintain. So it's best to select specific pieces of geometry and then delete history.